Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rahmatun-Nisa. So this is my turn. I will explain about norm reference and criterion reference test. In a norm reference test, each test participant score is interpreted in relation to a mean, or we can say average score, and medium or middle scores, and standard deviation, that's mean level of difference in scores, and the last is percentile rank. The purpose of this test is to place the test participant in the ranking order. The form of the scores used to numerical score. For example, 230 out of 300, and then we can use rank in percent. For example, 84%, which means test taker scores are better than 84% of the total number of the test taker, but below 16 of the test takers administration that. So the special feature in norm reference is standardized tests, such as the Scholastic Aptitude Test or SAT, or the test of English as a foreign language, as we know is TEFL. So this test is for a large scale with results supported by test taker. And money and efficiency are important issues in this test. Therefore, the principle of practicality, approval, and validity are the main ones. And the second is criterion reference test are made to give test participants feedback in a particular course or objective. And the typical of this test is achievement test in class only involve students in one class and are connected to the curriculum. Here, there is a responsibility required by the teacher as the test administrator to provide useful and targeted feedback to the student, or what Euler calls instructional value. In this test, the principle of practicality is still important, but authenticity and watchback are the main concern. And the next point is some practical steps to test construction. The first step is test toward clear, unambiguous objective. So to design a test, we need to make sure the student actually perform the objective criteria that the test is designed to assess, and avoid the student said after they taken the test they do not see the relationship between the test and the material that they have learned. So a teacher must know specifically what he wants to be tested, and carefully list everything that you think your student should know or be able to do based on the material which students are responsible. And for the example, you can see our paper. I don't include the example on PowerPoint. So your goals can, for testing purposes, be as simple as listing the following grammatical structures and communicative skills in the unit that say you have recently taught in grammar. You can list text questions, simple past tense and negative statements, and information questions, irregular past tense verbs, who as subject, anyone, someone, and no one, conjunctions, so and because, that, the list for grammar test. And then communication skills. The list is guessing what happened, finding out who did something, talking about family and friends, talking about famous people and events, giving reasons, or asking for confirmations. And the second step is, from your objective, draw up test specification. So after we make an ambiguous objective, so we must draw up the specification. We can use a simple and practical outline on the test specification. For example, we conduct a test within 40 minutes, so our specification is how we divided the test period into 40 minutes. Then maybe the specification will be, you can see the example in our paper. So objective, there are listening, multiple choice, and writing production. So the specification in listening period in 15 minutes. In the part 1 of listening is minimal sentence pair. Choose the sentence that you think you hear. 10 pairs, 2 thems, and cover take questions, negative statement, guessing what happened, finding out who did something. And in the part 2 of listening, conversation, choose the correct answer, 5 items. Cover information questions, talking about family and friends. And the second multiple choice period in 10 minutes, 15 items in a storyline format. Cover simple past tense, past irregular verbs, anyone, someone, and no one. And the last objective is writing production. And in period 15 minutes. The topic is why I liked or didn't like a recent movie. The cover are affirmative and negative statement, conjunction, so and because, giving reasons. So this informal class-oriented specification gives you an indication. A. Which of the topics you will discuss. And B. What type of items. C. How many items will be in each section. And D. How much the time allocated to each objective. We can see there is no communication skill and grammar. This may be a decision based on the time you devote to this goal, or only the limited numbers of minutes available to administer the test. But this course is very likely to have a lot of oral production in it. But for practicality reasons, oral productions is also not included in this test. And 3. Draft your test. The design for a test will give you an idea of what the test will be like how student will be deal with it, how the language and context are, how long the stimulation is listening, how well the flow is, and also how things like the test format will work. And the items may look like this: listening in part 1, then last night's party. Teacher says, we sure made a mess last night, didn't we? Student read, we sure made no mess last night, did we? We sure made a mess last night, didn't we? Just like this, how the student respond and deal with the test. And to maintain authenticity, it may be necessary to help other people, or we need other people to help us, or make a record where each one reads a different parts, so that the students will easily understand that two people are talking. If conditions are not possible, be sure to read the two parts with different sounds and body directions, so students can understand what is talking. And 4 is revise your test. At this stage, you will do everything you have done and ask a number of important questions, like, are the directions to each section absolutely clear? Is there an example item for each section? Does each item measure a specified objective? Is each item stated in clear, simple language? Does each multiple choice item have appropriate distractor, that is, are the wrong item clearly wrong and yet sufficiently alluring that they aren't ridiculously easy, and etc. And 5. Final edit, work process, and print the test. In an ideal situation, maybe we can test all the kind of the test to the student before actually applying to them. However, in everyday teaching, it is certainly difficult to do like that. So we need to do is what we can to bring students to an instrument that is to the best of your ability, practical, reliable, and valid. So after completing the preparation phase carefully, the final editing is done. When in this editing phase, imagine we are in a position as a student. Go through each set of directions and all items in detail slowly, adjusting the time to the needs and abilities of students, not our ability as a teacher. If the test time needs to be shortened or extended, make the necessary adjustment. Then make sure your test is neat and not clutter on the page. If your test has a listening component, make sure the listening script is clear and the audio equipment is functioning properly. And the sixth step is utilize your feedback after administering the test. After the test is carried out, we can gather information such as what is the level of difficulty of the test for students, about the time limits on the test, and about student effective reactions to the test and their general performance. And the last step, or seven steps, provide ample washback. After evaluating the test and returning it to students, feedback must be given. The washback principle discussed earlier. Use information from test performance as a stepping stone for review or move to the next unit. And the next point is turning existing tests into more effective procedures. First is facilitate strategies option for test taker. The first principle is to facilitate students with appropriate and useful strategies for taking the test. With some preparations in the test strategy, students can ease their fears and do their best during the exam or during the test. With the preparation of this strategy, students can avoid mistakes on the test because of the format of the test only. They must be able to show their abilities with optimal effort. And the second is establish phase validity. Sometimes students don't know what is being tested when they take the test. Phasing validity means that according to student the test is valid. You can help grow the perception with a carefully constructed, well-thought-out format, a test that is clearly doable within the allotted time limit. There is an example, table 24.1, before, during, and after test strategies. You can see the paper for the example on page 24. Before the exam, before the test, like give the student all the information you can about the test, exactly what will the test cover, which topic will be the most important, with what kind of items will be included, how long will it be, and to encourage students to do a systematic review of material. For example, skimming the textbook and other material. Outline major points, write down the example, and etc. And during the test, like as soon as the test is distributed, tell students to quickly look over the whole test in order to get a good grasp of its different parts. Second, remind them to mentally figure out how much time they will be need for each part. 3. Advise them to concentrate as carefully as possible. And 4. Alert students a few minutes before the end of the class period so that they can proofread their answer, catch careless errors, and still finish on time. An example after the test: when you return the test, include feedback on specific things the student did well, what he or she didn't do well, and if possible, the reason for such a judgment on your part. And the second, advise the students to pay carefully attention in class to whatever you say about the test result. 3. Encourage questions from students. And 4. Advise students to make a plan to pay special attention in the future to points that they are weak on. For the clear example, for clear understanding, you can see our paper. And continue the item for help grow that perception. The third point is items that are clear and uncomplicated. And 4, directions that are crystal clear. 5th, tasks that are familiar and relate to other coursework. And the last is a difficulty level that is appropriate from your students. 3. Design authentic tests. As much as possible, use the language in tests as natural and authentic. In addition, give context to the language so the item is not just a series of unrelated language sample. Thematic organization of items can help in this regard, or consider the storyline that can search from your items. And 4, work for washback. One way to improve is to provide a number of specific comments on students' test performance. Many teachers just returning tests to students with letters or numbers. In fact, letters, grades, and scores that indicate true or false numbers do not provide students with intrinsic interest information. So when you return a written test, or even a data sheet from an oral production test, consider giving more than one number or value or price as your feedback. At least the teacher can respond to as many details as possible in the exam in the time allowed. Giving comment can be in the form of praise or also criticism of weakness, providing strategic clues about how students can improve their learning abilities so that it will trigger and motivate students to become better in the next test. Another way to increase student motivation is to get them involved in the design and review process and in the evaluation of response afterwards. Finally, washback also implies that students have ready access for you to discuss the feedback and evaluations that you provide. So the next is alternative in assessment. Alternative in assessment, we can use portfolios. First is portfolios. One of the most popular forms of alternative valuation is portfolio development. A portfolio is a collection of student work that aims to show students and others their efforts, progress, and achievements in a given field. By Gaines and Upshur. The portfolio include essays, compositions, poems, book reports, works of art, video or audio recordings of students' oral productions, journals, and almost anything else they want to determine. Following are some guidelines for using portfolio in a classroom. First, specify to student what the purpose of the portfolio is, like to emphasize compliments, to offer tangible material, for feedback from the teacher, and etc. And the second is give clear directions to students on how to get started, write the portfolios. Many students will never have compiled a portfolio before and may be mystified about what to do. Showing a sample. Showing a sample portfolio from a previous students might help to stimulate thoughts on what to include. And the fourth is give guidelines on acceptable materials to include on portfolios. And the fifth, collect portfolio on pre-announced date and return them promptly. And the last is be clear yourself on the principal purpose of the portfolio and make sure. And second of alternative assessment is journal. Usually journal are considered only as an opportunity for students to write freely without paying attention to grammar. Journal can have a number of objectives, like learning language, grammar discussion, respond to reading, self-assessments, and reflections on attitude and feeling about yourself. Now, the quality of the journal writing assessment plays an important role in the teaching learning process, because journal writing is a dialogue between students and teachers. The journal becomes one of the new variations for teacher to offer various types of feedback to students. Using the journal as an assessment instrument requires a systematic and specific approach using guidelines similar to those recommended for the portfolio, almost similar with portfolios. First, specify to student what the purpose, and the second, give clear direction to student on how to get started. Similar, right? And the third, give guidelines on length of each entry and any other format expectation. And then collect journal on a pre-announced date and return them promptly. Be clear yourself on the principle. Help students to process your feedback and show them how to respond your feedback. This processing might take place in a conference or simple talk written feedback. And the third alternative assessment is conferences. Conferences in education have a number of possible functions. Here are as follows. First, commenting on draft of essay and reports, and then reviewing portfolios, responding to journals, advising on a student's plan for a paper of presentations, exploring compensatory strategies to overcome weaknesses, giving feedback on the results of performance on the test, and setting learning goals for the near future. Conference become a way of approaching the process of teaching writing. The teacher can direct students according to concepts and one-by-one interaction between student and teacher, who can provide more specific feedback to their student. Through conferences, a teacher can act as a facilitator and guide, not as the main controller and deliverer of final grades. It is important to consider conferences as dialogues that do not have to be assessed. Conferences are basically formative, not summative. Formative assessment shows students toward further developments rather than offering a final summation of performance. And the fourth alternative assessment is observations. Observation is one of the teacher's ability in observing students in the class, so teachers know more about their students. Without having to take a test, teachers who are already professional can easily observe their students, directly involved in the learning process of students, and provide feedback directly. One of the aims of this observation is to assess as many students as possible without students realizing it. What is the form of observing student performance? Consider a number of possibilities. First, sentence level oral production, interaction with classmates, frequency of student-initiated responses, whole class or group work, quality of teacher-elicited response, evidence of listening comprehensions, evidence of attention span issues, learning style preferences, and etc. Use of strategic options in comprehension or productions, and the last is culturally specific linguistic and nonverbal factors. In observing classes, it is important to know the purpose of our observations, like why do you observe, what is observed, what is observed, how the system is, and how you explain the material to students. Checklists and grids are a common form of recorded behavior observed. In the Spada and Froelich system, the grid captures variables such as the performance of the whole class, group, and individual, formal versus functional errors, and which of the four skills are involved. The observer identifies the performance and checks the appropriate box in the grid. The checklist doesn't have to be too complicated. Simpler choices record the occurrence of student errors in certain grammatical categories or action zones in the classroom. For example, might be more realistic. You will probably the rating scale has also been suggested for recording observation. One type of grading scale asks teacher to indicate the frequency of appearance of target performance, both on separate frequency scale like always 5 points and if never is 1 point. The grading scale may be inappropriate for recording observations after facts on the same day but after class periods. And then you will probably find practicality and reliability moderate in observation, especially if the goal remains simple. Face validity and content validity tend to get high marks because observation tend to be integrated into the ongoing course process. Authenticity is high because if the observation goes relatively unnoticed by the student, then there is a little change. The situation is made up. Washback can be high if you take the time and effort to help students realize your data about their performance. And then, I forget. And then self and peer assessment as a part of alternative assessment. Student whose success is expanding the learning process outside the classroom and the presence of the teacher or tutor, independently mastering the art of self-assessment, and where peers are available to give an assessment, why not make use of such additional input? Research has shown a number of advantages of self-assessment and peers assessment. Speed, direct info of student, encourage of autonomy, and increase motivation due to self-improvement in the learning process. Of course, there will be flaws and most likely what happens in subjective assessment too. So this must be considered whenever involving students in self-assessment and peers. The following are some ways that self and peer assessment can be applied in language classroom. First, in oral productions, completing student self-checklist or peer checklist, listen to oral recording to check for pronunciation or grammar errors in a natural conversation, asking for confirmation from others, set goals to create opportunities for speaking. In listening, and then listening comprehension, listen to TV or radio broadcast and check understanding with a partner. In pair or group work, asking when not to understand something, listen to academic lecture, and check yourself on the content quiz, set goals to increase listening opportunities. Next, writing. In writing, revising one's own writing, revise written works with colleagues, peer editing, proofreading, set goals to increase writing opportunities. And the last is reading. Reading portions of a textbook followed by self-understanding question. Read and check understanding with a partner. Take a vocabulary quiz. Self-assessing reading habits, and set goals. Okay, in the last is scrutinizing the alternative. After considering using some of the alternative just discussed, two factors are worth noting, namely maximizing practicality and reliability in procedures and focusing on students' actual language performance. Okay, first, maximizing practicality and reliability. Formally standardized tests are almost a very practical and reliable instrument. Both function is to minimize the time and money for the test designer and test taker, and to achieve accuracy in the assessment. Alternatives such as portfolios or discussing with students about written works draft, or observing students from time to time, which require considerable time and effort from the teachers and students. Even more time must be spent if the teacher hopes to offer a reliable evaluations. The perception that the multiple choice format is unavoidable from authenticity and washback is a challenge currently faced by all teachers who need to be removed. With some creativity and effort, we can transform the inauthentic and negative washback test products into a more pedagogically satisfying learning experience by doing the following. First, building as much out, sorry, building as much authenticity as possible into multiple choice test types and items. And second, designing classroom tests that have both objective scoring section and open-ended response sections, varying the performance test. And third, turning multiple choice tests result into diagnostic feedback on areas of needed improvement. Fourth, maximizing the preparation period before a test to elicit performance relevant to the ultimate criteria of the test. And teaching test-taking strategies. And the last but not least, helping students to see beyond the test, don't teach to the test. And the real last is triangulating information on a student before making a final assessment of competence. When we look at alternative in the assessment in this chapter, we must pay attention to Brown and Hudson's warning to examine the practicality, reliability, and validity of these alternatives at the same time as we celebrate their face validity, washback potential, and authenticity. The proposed assessment serves as a triangulation of competency measures, applying responsibility for being meticulous in setting goals, response modes, and criteria for evaluation and interpretations. And the second, performance-based assessment. Another interesting factor that plays a role in alternative in assessment is the recognition of the importance of performance-based assessment, sometimes only called performance appraisal. The drive for more performance-based assessment is part of the same general education reform movement that has raised strong objections to using standardized test scores as the only measures of student competence. The argument, as you can guess, is that most standardized tests do not bring true results to test takers. And performance-based assessments describe productive skills that can be observed, such as speaking and writing, tasks that are relevant to the content. And O'Malley and further peers consider performance-based assessment to be a subset of authentic assessment with the following characteristics. First, students make a constructed response. And second, they engage in higher order thinking with open-ended tests. And 3, tests are meaningful, engaging, and authentic. 4, tests call for the integration of language skills. 5, both process and product are assessed. And 6, the depth of a student's mastery is emphasized over breadth. Performance-based assessments need to be done carefully. Teachers often assume that if a student can do something, then the process has fulfilled its own objectives, and the evaluator teacher only needs to put a check mark in the class book next to a certain competency. In fact, performance as an assessment procedure needs to be treated with the same accuracy as traditional tests. This implies that the teacher must state the overall goal of the performance, specify the objectives or criteria of the performance in detail, prepare students for performance in stepwise progressions, use a reliable evaluation form, checklist, or rating sheets. Treat performance as opportunities for giving feedback and provide that feedback systematically. And, if possible, utilize self and peer assessment judiciously. In short, performance appraisal is not completely identical with the concept of alternative evaluation. Rather, it is better understood as one of the main features of the many alternatives in the assessment available to us. Tests as part of our assessment process do not need to violate the principle of authenticity, intrinsic motivation, and student centering. Along with several new alternatives in assessment, tests become an indispensable component in the curriculum. Remember that assessment and teaching are partners in the learning process. Periodic assessment, both formal and informal, can increase motivation as they serve as milestones of student progress. And assessment encourages retention of information through the feedback they give on learners' competence. And assessments can provide a sense of periodic closure to various units and modules of a curriculum. And fourth, assessments can encourage students' self-evaluation of their progress and spur them to set goals for themselves. Next is assessment can promote student autonomy as they confirm areas of strength and areas needing further work. And the last is assessment can aid in evaluating teaching effectiveness. Okay, I think that's all from us. We are so sorry for all the mistakes. Thank you.